Welcome to Vicarious Insights, the podcast where we dive into the world of disabilities, learning from experts, providers, participants, and their families. I'm your host, Jace. Today we have a special guest with us, James from Fresh Perspectives, which is a small business consultancy. James, how would you explain what this is?
As mentioned, I started my own business probably only a couple of weeks ago, to be honest.
Yep.
Coming out of the disability sector, so I worked in the disability sector hands-on for around about 3 years or so.
Yep.
I realised that there's more that I can do, I suppose, in terms of the skill set that I've got, and I'm pretty good at pretty quickly picking up things with businesses. So yeah, it seemed like a natural progression for me to kind of step out and do my own thing. After working in the sector hands-on for 3 years, so I got the opportunity now to support more providers, more companies, and ultimately for me, I suppose the goal is similar to yourself. I want to support as many clients as I can, or many as participants as they're deemed by the NDIS, to
Yep.
get the outcomes that they're after to improve their lifestyle.
Okay. So you started off working directly with clients?
No, no, my background, I moved to Australia in 2007 as a professional athlete. Spent some time in retail. When the GFC hit, ended up moving back into sport and rec, and then bounced around a few different venues in Queensland.
Yep.
I actually ended up taking a role in South Australia, and then moved back to Queensland to work for Bounce, the trampoline parks.
Yep.
And we had a venue at Robina where, unfamiliarly to the unfamiliarly
We make
to the
up words,
company.
what we do.
Yeah. To the company that, so they hadn't had the initial success that they were hoping for with the venue. So I essentially went in, and the goal was to genuinely, from a community engagement perspective, try and turn the venue around. So one of the things that we looked to do was who was available to use the venue during the day, because that's when it was really quiet. So we reached out to school groups, daycares, and then a few disability providers. And the NDIS on the Gold Coast had kind of, I believe at the time, really sort of only just started to crack.
Okay.
So we did we had some visits from Gold Coast Rec and Sport, Anglicare. There were a few other groups that we partnered with, but the inspiration behind it, for myself and for the team that was working the venue at the time, was Emma. Emma was the I would say my personal ground zero to and the entry path to working in the disability sector. So a little bit about Emma. Emma was, from memory, I think she was 24. She had the gross motor skills of around about 17-year-old, mental of around about a 4-year-old, but she was living in a retirement home, and the support workers that she had would typically just get her and go to a park, and it was, you know, it was, I suppose, what we would consider to be babysitting, right? There was no engagement or development of skills and competencies of the things that she could do.
And no
A
one
friend of
on
mine.
her level either. Like if she's at
No,
that
no, no.
age, she's
It
around.
was, yeah, it wasn't a good story. And I remember it being in the news at the time as well, the issue with those, clients or participants, again, with disabilities being in aged care homes and not having their own access to suitable home provision. So a friend of mine was working for FSG, the disability care provider at the time. So they were still going. She ended up bringing Emma in. She looked after Emma 2 days a week, and we could just see the difference that it made, because there was this just enormous sense of freedom that Emma had in a trampoline park where she would never have been before. And then from it was really from Emma's visit and Emma's, what you could see as her experience, and the fact that her gross motor skills improved, her and community ability to communicate with the other staff improved. She became more social. She was speaking to other clients that were venue at the time, and then we'd have the other as it developed, other disability groups would come through at the same time, and she developed, a friendship along with those groups as well. Um,
Yeah.
and I genuinely have had, I suppose, Emma in my mind as a bit of a project filter for, are we doing the right things? Are we actually looking at this the right way in terms of the disability sector and the provisions?
Yeah.
It's very
Okay.
clear from my mind that the sector on the whole,
Yeah.
um, wasn't supporting every client in the way that they should do. It
Yeah.
probably isn't now, in all truthfulness, and that's probably an unattainable target. But I realised that there was something that I as an individual could do with my teams that were working for me.
Okay.
And then from that location, we spawned out. I've moved on to a couple of different places. Worked at Gold Coast Gymnastics Club, which wouldn't typically fall in the disability space, but even then, I tried to get some stuff happening with the Sporting Wheelers Association because I didn't see why those clients that were in wheelchairs couldn't engage in gymnastics and from the rings and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, and then from gymnastics through COVID, that was that was a nightmare couple of years, and then entered the disability sector, I would say towards the back end of it. I think it was 2021, 2022. I think I entered disability sector with Johnny H.
What you're doing now is you sort of work directly inside somebody else's small business and
Yeah,
sort of help to work out what can be improved, and the
yeah.
pain points and what staff are really
It's
saying about the boss. Is it the juicy stuff?
Yeah,
Or?
yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's kind of like, I suppose if I had to describe it, it's like undercover boss, but I'm not really undercover because everyone knows who I am, and I'm not the boss. But I quickly get to kind of scrape across the business, work out, yeah, not necessarily just even the pain points, right? But the things that the business does really well that it probably takes for granted at that point. So it can double down and do more of it because it does it really well, and it's probably trying to take on another market or another sector. But in truth, if it put that energy into what it does really well and honed it down, they'd probably get, 2 or 3 times the success. It's easy to spread too thin as well, right? So yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment. Um, but yeah, keen to keep in the disability space and sector as well, because I think with the reform that's coming through, which is consistent, which is simultaneously a really good thing and a really bad thing. There's a lot that goes on, and I talk about the disability space potentially being a bit of a calling as well. It's nice to have found a space that I feel like the work that I do doesn't just contribute to the organization that I'm working for, and it doesn't necessarily just contribute to the staff that are working for me, but it's also got that ultimate end user that actually needs the supports that we can provide. So if
Yeah,
we do an ultimate, you deliver the ultimate service and product, it's not just a win-win, it's a win-win-win-win-win-win, right? Like
yeah.
the economy benefits from the NDIS, and the social and community engagement from the participants, and the engagement and welfare of the staff because they feel like they've got a purpose and they're value driven and they're getting the things that they want from it. So holistically, it's a really nice sector to work in.
So you can take a nice company and help them to improve and therefore extend their reach, and then from there go on and be able to help more clients, participants, people that need the help. So by helping a business, a small business, who I would feel, I'd like to believe that a lot of small businesses definitely lead with their heart, and they come in there like, I'm here to care. I'm really good at this, but
Yeah,
maybe, and I feel this only because of who I've met. So um, that a lot of these people may be really good at what they do face to face and looking after the individual, but need a little bit more help behind the scenes with growing the business and extending out. Is that?
yeah. I think that's a really good observation, right? We're all really good at different things. And I think that's the benefit that organizations have when they scale. So when they get to a certain size, or they're bigger, larger not-for-profits, you end up with there's a few critical things in there, but one of the most critical things is diversity. So diversity, certainly within the disability sector, right? We consider it something that we talk about all the time, and you'll hear about essentially disability or ability. Let's call it that, right? Ability diversity. You'll hear about racial diversity, but the true killer or the true winning factor, to be honest, not the killer, the winning factor is actually diversity of thought. So there's a lot of research out there in terms of how do you construct a team that's going to win? And the truth is that it's not, um, birds of a feather flock together, right? Like minds think alike. You'd think that that's the way that you do it, but the truth is it isn't. The way that you build a team that can beat other teams is by creating not necessarily a team with friction in amongst it. That takes good
Yeah,
leadership and good management, but it's that diversity of thought. I understand what you're seeing, but this is what I see, and having the opportunity and the framework that you can essentially talk through that difference so that you get the outcome that you're after in the long run. That's the killer, and it's hard for small organizations to get that. The common feedback is it's me, myself, and my thoughts, or commonly so let's say it's the husband that's running the organization doing the supports, and they've got a partner, and they might offload to the partner and speak to the partner in the evening, but the partner's not in the industry or in the business to really fully understand what's going on, and they're partners, right? So there's always sharing, but you're not going to share to the same uh, extent because you're already probably on the same page. Otherwise, you wouldn't be partners, right?
Yeah, because that's the bird of the feather. But then I've got that different thing during the day. She's off
Yeah,
managing another company, and he's off managing this one. They've got some ideas that are the same, but they are dealing with a different kettle of fish. Yeah.
yeah. If you look at, I actually find it quite interesting to go through, and whenever there's an update of the NDIS reform, right? Typically, and you go through and you read it, there's at the moment it seems to be that there's a lot of negative commentary around the um, reviews and feedbacks. Interestingly, typically different perspectives within that negative feedback, right? So like and I'm not, and you're not, but if you were the NDIS and you were looking at that feedback, you'd probably be able to find that through those 30 different opinions, there probably would be at least one common vein that you'd be able to latch onto to then be able to implement that reform. And if you think about the opposite of that within a business, you end up with seven different thoughts, but between those thoughts, there generally is a level of commonality or fallback. So more research on that. As a Dr. Juliet Burke has done a lot of work on that. She's I would say led that diversity field. There's a really nice TED talk by to Juliet at it was TEDx Brisbane event quite a few years ago. I was very fortunate to attend that, and it certainly changed the way that I manage and lead my teams in terms of those what you would originally consider differences of opinion. You don't let them fester. You kind of point out the fact that you actually need those to be able to move on and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Funnily enough, that's literally why I'm doing the podcast. I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's what, because I'm a one-man band at the moment. Um, where am I going to get more insight from outside what I do? I need that other stuff. I need the insights that you have. I need the insights that somebody else has. So something that I can learn from other people's what they're doing, what they've done, how they've built, why they've built, can potentially help me. So I'm here picking people's brains. You're amazing for sharing your knowledge, which is great. Just the things that you've been saying there, my brain's going, ooh, oh, okay. I'm gonna have to have a look at a TED talk too. So I've had a look at
yeah. It's honestly it's a really good one. It's probably like you pick your top five favorites or whatever. It's definitely one of mine for sure. So
yeah, okay.
it's definitely changed the way that I look at teams. And actually, what I'd also suggest, to be honest, then, is you can go hunting for people to get that diversity that you think. So I can't remember verbatim the work, but essentially, I think there's six characteristics of an individual. So if I said to you, Jay, sorry, your business, you're going to take on an extra staff member. There's generally one of seven ways that your brain would think. I remember it being about the people. How does it impact the people? It's the outcome, finances. Brain's gone. I know one of them is risk because that's also really rare. And essentially, you'll find so you run a big team. You can ask someone. I imagine if we were taking on a new venue, what's the thing that you would think about out of these seven categories? And what you want is a spread of those seven categories, so that then you get that diversity of thought. So if you were thinking about, I might take on another staff member, oh, it's going to be really good because I know someone, so I've got the people covered, and the outcome would be that I'd get more clients. You might not be thinking about the risk component of doing that. So you find someone that's got a risk perspective or is more risk averse, I suppose, or risk conversational. So when you say that to them, they go, "Oh, geez, have you thought about this though?" And it's not because they don't think you should do it. It's just because that's where their brain goes. And you'll go, "Oh yeah, I have actually. I've thought about this, and this, and this," and you'll win them over. It's actually just bringing those things to life that actually enables you to then, as an owner, right, to then feel that you can move forward comfortably with your plan.
Just it's a different game of chess. It's still chess, but they play chess from their perspective, their way. And
100%. Yeah,
yeah,
we all see the phrase that I like, to be honest, I like using is that wearing glasses is kind of appropriate, right? We all see the world through our own lens, and it's shaped by the experiences that we've got that have got us till this point in time. So I'm kind of, I suppose, blessed in a way that I've my life generally on a very grand scale has actually got me to this point because it enables me to see certain things that other people don't or affirm the things that they do. But ultimately we're all the same. No one's actually ever traveled the same path to get to a different, to the destination that they're at. And it's by looking at that that you can then eliminate the group think, which is, in theory, you could argue, right? We've got a parliamentary system, so there's one bunch of people that think one thing and another bunch of people that think another thing, and nothing in the middle.
yeah.
Probably a pretty black and white example of what not to be.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So yes, you don't want the two opposing sides going, we can't come to an
Yeah,
agreement.
well, it's
We want
you,
people
you,
that, hey,
you
here's your input, here's your input. What can we get as
yeah, and
all of that?
there's balance within that as well, actually. So, um, two very extreme leaders. So there's lots of leadership theory, and I'm like fully nerd out on this. So there's a leadership theory that's called trait-based leadership, which is essentially a homage to leaders are born, not made, right? So that you're born with certain personality traits, and those personality traits come out. And if you compared, say, Barack Obama to Winston Churchill, right, which two very sort of extreme comparisons, and you wouldn't think that you could make the comparison. They're almost at very opposite ends of the spectrum. So Churchill was very individualized, right? I've got a thing in my head, we're going to crack on and do it. And there's examples even prior to the Second World War, where he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think his role was. There was a building that was on fire in London. It had some hijackers or robbers that were in it, and he ordered the fire crews to stand down and let the building burn down. Now, the history books are kind of, in my opinion, a bit muddled around why. Some would say it was to save the firefighters, the others would say it was actually his way of making sure that they learned their lesson, right? You set an example. Now, if you think about that, it sounds really nasty, right? But then actually, if you take that approach to the Second World War, that's why the Allied forces won, right? Opposite end of the spectrum, you've got Barack Obama. So Barack Obama was a very democratic leader. And again, I wasn't there to witness it, would have loved to have been there, but apparently he wouldn't make a decision without hearing everyone else's sort of voice in the room. And some of the feedback around his leadership style was that it was quite hard to make a decision because he would avoid making decisions where he didn't feel like he had consensus. So everyone agreeing to the same thing.
Ooh.
So two very, very sort of different extremes. And I think another theory that you can throw over the top of that is called contingency leadership theory, which basically says that it's around the relationship between the leader, essentially their followers, and the situation, and it's that triangle that then determines what the best approach is.
I'm
What
just
does this mean
taking some notes for my.
what does this what the thing is this is all sort of fresh in my head, right? Because I've just finished uni, and I genuinely love this stuff.
Okay.
What's the takeaway for small business owners, right? The takeaway for small business owners, in my opinion, and people that are working in the sector, is watch out for your blind spots. So things that you don't necessarily you sort of know that they're there, but you might just kind of ignore them, right? Like, I know that I'm not very good at that, but I'm not going to do it because I'm not good at it and I don't want to do it. Okay, so a bit like,
Yeah.
houseworky stuff, bookkeeping. That's probably something, right, that most people would avoid because they're not necessarily pumped about doing it. So we leave it and avoid it, and then it creates issues down the track. So watch out for the blind spot type things, and then try and fill the gaps where you just genuinely go, I actually don't know that. Find out the things that you don't know, because invariably they always start right with I don't know the things that I don't know.
Yeah.
So what you're doing with the podcast is a great example of that, because the more people that you speak to, the more times that you'll go, oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
And then you'll write it down, go away and either realize that you need a bit of a plan for it, or actually that doesn't really impact me because I do this, and rationalize it and move on.
Yeah, it's the great thing. The more heads are better than one. It's
100%. Yeah, that's. The irony there, mate. Going back to Dr. Juliet's work, I think that was the title of her book. Which actually it was actually which two heads are better than one. It wasn't more heads are better than one. It was which two heads are better than one. Yeah, so highly recommend it to people. Definitely worth having a read.
it's a bit of one that will go on. I like to listen. I like to listen to my books, so I get a list of them. So the next ones that'll go on, because when they're finished, I'm like, if I don't have something to slot in there.
Yeah, yeah. The TED. I mean, to be fair, the TED Talks are real good. A really solid foundation, really good start point.
Yeah, cool. Um, all right, so you've you've got into the disability sector through what we've just spoken about. You've just come out of school, out of university. What were you studying at university?
So it was my second MBA. The first one I did was generalized, and I graduated in 2017.
Yeah.
And then it was actually this time. Do you know what? Actually, it's really funny. It's my anniversary. So it was this day last year. I went to a university networking event. I was talking to one of the lecturers, and they pointed out that, oh, actually, did you realize that if you did some extra modules, you could actually obtain a second MBA specializing in a subject? So I was like, oh, okay, that might actually kind of work, because I felt like I was getting a bit sticky with where I was at, and I hadn't consciously learned something or stretched myself for a little while. So I took on the challenge. Yes, the second one I've specialised in human resources, which has always been again, I suppose a bit of a passion and a bit of a calling for myself. I'd like to think that all that nerding out I just did on the leadership stuff, I'd actually like to think that I bring that to life in workplaces for the staff that work for me. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. So filing. I have a habit of, like, my eyes go off into the distance. I know when I'm talking face to face with people, I'm like, oh no, I'm here. I'm just putting all this stuff in the right spots in my brain so it stays.
Yeah, I'm just cataloging. I get it. I love I love movies, and I'm trying to think of the movie name now actually, but there's a movie where there's like a bunch of men, and they talk about their own mental filing system, and one of them's got like a almost like a lighthouse with a spiral staircase, and there's files all around it. So the whole room is a filing case, and then he's got like a basement at the bottom, which is the memories that no one else can see. It's a really great analogy for actually what goes on in my head as well, because I'm the same. I'm like, kind of, where have I got that stored? And then someone will say something, and I'll think, oh, hang on, I've got that somewhere, and I'll have to like run off in my own head and go and find it. It's quite funny.
That's interesting. I do hypnotherapy as well, and that's that just made me think of, that's one of the things that I get to get into the relaxed state, is to go down the staircase.
Spiral staircase. Yeah, right. There you go.
And
Yeah.
Sorry to segue there. I don't actually tell everybody that, so whoops. Now, you also mentioned that you've just completed some research, and I think this is specific to the disability sector.
Yeah, yeah. So my capstone, the final project that I did for the course, basically concluded with some research. And I, again, wanted to look through the leadership lens of within the disability space to see if there were any gaps. I had a few initial project ideas, but to be honest, they weren't capstone. They were like probably 2 or 3 year research pieces in partnership with the university that would lead more to like a PhD type scenario.
And sorry, capstone is
like a final project. So it's just like the end, it's like the final 100 meters of a marathon type thing, but it certainly didn't feel like that. So
okay.
Yeah, it's just the final research piece. So yeah, I decided to do mine on the staff engagement levels within the disability sector,
Yeah.
but specifically looking at things through the lens of leadership. So almost what can the leaders within the disability sector do to improve staff engagement. And then I suppose with that, I'll just put in kind of brackets at the end of it, retention, because there's a recognized retention issue within the disability sector across all of Australia, and it doesn't discriminate, to be honest. So it is non-discriminatory in terms of how much it cuts through. So there was one of the reports that I actually used for the data that basically says that it's the churn within the disability sector, as in the people that are leaving the sector not returning, is 3 times higher than any other sector that exists in Australia. So from a participant at the NDIS, and through my lens, looking at the sector, there's more that we collectively as a operators within the sector that we need to do, because if we're churning staff and there's staff that care as well, so disability sector is more of a calling than it is than a career and a pathway, right? It's something that we're always inspired and drawn to work in.
Yeah.
We're doing something wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, I find it. I'm just thinking about different things that I read in the Facebook groups, and it sounds like all of these new people coming in, and there's a lot of negativity about that. At least, well, maybe I'm just reading the wrong areas. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of negativity about that, and that's actually a good thing, because I mean, with experience, new people aren't going to have experience. They're never going to have experience and accept their own life experience. And then a lot of the young ones coming in, they're getting into it, and they're like, "Hey, we've got a business now." But it's a good thing, because we need the new ones to be coming in to learn, to get experience, to be leveling themselves up.
I think the critical thing, from my perspective, that I look at with the way that the sector is at the moment, is around the sustainability of it.
Yeah.
And typically that would go back to, say, the finances of the sector, right? In terms of how sustainable is it? Because invariably when you look at, when Bill Shorten's on the TV, talk about how many billions of dollars the NDIS is, and we're doing all this good stuff for the thing, and then the next news article that comes on is about the fraud team that are there, and we've caught this many people, and we've saved the NDIS this much money. But the truth is that it's a workforce driven program. So without the workforce, there is no product or service to offer. So it's really around making sure that the workforce, right, those frontline workers that you've got, are actually getting all the sustenance, essentially, that they need to be able to move on. And what makes that tricky, I suppose, you can liken this to other things that you'll hear in the news, because you'll hear about aged care workers not necessarily getting the pay and recognition that they need in the marketplace. The thing that often pops up, not at the same time, but around that, invariably, will be the childcare workers. So the childcare industry is generally the same. So we all operate under government awards, and the SHADS award, which is essentially aged care, I suppose, as well, is very common. But typically you don't hear about disability workers not getting paid enough, because it's more of a calling, I would suggest, than those other sectors. People will want to work in childcare or want to work in aged care. But there's something I personally think that's a bit deeper on another level, where it comes to working with participants with disabilities.
Yeah, you're making me self-reflect there a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to wear that. I'm like, yes, it's a calling. Yeah, it feels nice.
I think it is, and it's I go back to, I've worked since finishing school. I've worked in, when I was over in London, worked in sport and rec venues over there, and there was a collection of about 6 or 7 venues that I worked in across the country. I did triathlon, actually, and it was a hobby, and then it became a career, not really a career, but a job, I suppose, that I did for 4 years. I got to travel and race and that sort of thing. And there was a big draw off for the Dick and Ricky Hoyt. So if you don't know the Dick and Ricky Hoyt story, you have to go online and have a look at that. And I was always, Okay, so Dick and Ricky Hoyt said, I might get them the wrong way around. Rick had cerebral palsy. He was the first person with a disability to finish an Ironman, and he was basically dragged around the swim, pushed on the bike, and he was in a wheelchair for the run, and it was his dad that pushed him the whole way. Um, and they yeah, incredible story. And now the person to, I suppose, follow from an inspirational standpoint again within the triathlon world is a guy called Chris Nikic, I think his name is, and he was the first person with Down syndrome to finish the Ironman World Championships. Not last year, year before, so 18 months ago. So yeah, even in that sports world, I was always drawn to their stories. I was, I'd be in the professional field, but looking at the age group as kind of inspiration, right, to carry on.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get the calling, until I kind of met Emma though. And even then, to be honest, when I stopped working at Bounce, it wasn't really, I was always really sort of passionate about the sector. And like I say, I did tried to do stuff with the sporting wheelers and tried to make those connections, but sort of couldn't. And then it was when I got back when I actually entered the industry for the first time with Johnny H, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, this is it. This is what I was, um, yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily meant to do because I don't necessarily think that's true. But I found that I was really in alignment with my personal values. I was able to support the staff in their personal values and their delivery of just awesome experiences to the clients, and the clients reaped the benefits of what it was that we were trying to do. So, yeah,
Puzzle pieces were mentally fitting together there for you.
yeah, it's that. Yeah, like I said before, it's about that. It's about the triangle, right? It's about sustainability of things. So there's the staff and the clients and the business itself. All three get ticked off. Can't have one without the other.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I think.
win-win. I like that. That's pretty much, I guess, the motto of my business. It's got to be win-win-win. If it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
got to be a win for my client, because otherwise, why else am I there? A win
100%.
for me, and there's got to be another win there involved, whether it's for their family, another business, or whatever it is. If you get the three wins, then that means something's moving right. If you can get more than
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's it. And I think if you go back to your original point around there being lots of people entering the sector. We jumped onto this from sustainability standpoint. Lots of people entering the sector doesn't necessarily mean it's an incredibly sustainable platform though, because if you think about it through the client's eyes, right, so you just look at the journey through the client's eyes, um, it's kind of really hard, right, to know where to go because there's so many people and so many options. And it's a really good thing, right, of the NDIS where it's 100% choice and control.
yeah,
Um, and I guess this is one of the reasons that they want to try and put that reform into place, right? Because how do you tell the difference between credible and not credible, given press is either around how much the NDIS costs versus how much crooks are robbing it? How do you tell a credible provider from non-credible? You go through that registration process, and essentially it becomes like um, well, not quite a franchise, but like a authorized retailer type scenario.
yeah. You've kicked off the checks and balances, so you're at least
Yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
minimum
And
standard is this. You've
and,
proved
and
that's not
what that is, who knows, right? And again, really interesting to the you know the reforms pushing forward with a tiered level of, as I understand it, when I last read it, which has been a couple of weeks to be honest, tiered level of registrations, not now, I don't believe, for capital providers. So anyone that's doing capital funding or capital projects issue, or items, I should say, sorry, they're not necessarily looking at registration for those. It's more the service providers with multiple tiers to handle different varying levels of clients. So you'll have to be highly registered if you've got a very high needs client, for instance, which kind of common sense, right? Kind of makes sense because you'll have more boxes to tick in terms of the credibility that you've got for your staff and the processes. Whereas you and I both know that there are clients that are very high functioning that actually just need a little bit of a hand between the shoulders and a bit of guidance and support in order for them to get the outcomes that they need for their funding. So,
yeah.
um, kind of makes sense, but lots of small people popping up, kind of, it's they might pop up, but how long will they stay for?
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of churn in the sector, and again, I was really fortunate with Johnny H. Kind of got a footprint in three different parts of the country, and there were three completely different NDIS experiences across those three regions as well. So it's like a national program that operates with a very micro regional level, in terms of not necessarily the standard of offerings, but generally what's available to the clients in that area or pocket.
So what do you notice? So we're on the Gold Coast. So what are you noticing between, you said Sydney and Canberra and the Gold
Yeah,
Coast?
so we were set up in Western Sydney. That was where Johnny H was founded. And in Canberra, yeah, was the other location. Canberra, well, even just through the education systems, is completely different. So Canberra's got a college system. So school finishes at year 10, and then you go to a college in year 11s and 12. But the college could be within the school, but it's still different. So you can drop out of school when you get to year 10 and move into a TAFE college or a other pathway. So disability support can typically commence in year 11, quite commonly
Huh.
in Canberra, whereas in the other states it's kind of a bit harder to leave school from. It's even that on its own is completely different. The New South Wales education system has um, a really nice vocational support network that exists across its regions. Its basically job is to provide and find pathways for students that might not necessarily fall into the standard educational pathways.
Is that like the SLES program or?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So they kind of find those pathways and programs that are suitable for clients.
Yeah.
And the Education Queensland have really only recently launched that with a program that they've called the Aspire program, whose basically job it is they consider it to look after the year 13s. That's how they're deemed. But that year 13 support is essentially open for anyone, not just those that really sort of need it, if that makes any sort of sense.
Okay.
So it's like an open access that anyone can kind of tap into for support for, I'm struggling to settle in at university, right through to, I don't know what TAFE course to do, versus I'm not doing anything. Can you help point me in the right direction? So even within the education system, completely different, which then creates young adults that are prepared very differently, particularly if they've got a disability, for life post school and that new normal. And that's where I spent the most of my time at Johnny H, because I was speaking to the parents and the clients that were essentially either recently leaving school or looking to leave school, and that's where we were finding that our products and services kind of dovetailed really well to the education system.
Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting. And then yeah, we even within the NDIS system, within the NDIS like demographic within each of those three areas, it's very different. A lot more small local providers on the Gold Coast, not so much in Sydney, not so much in Canberra. Um, yeah, Sydney, Canberra, much more large, typically larger organisations.
Yep.
Yeah, whereas there's lots of smaller, what I would consider to be like almost like microbreweries, right? Which is very appropriate for the Gold Coast. But like lots of microbrewery NDIS operators on the Gold Coast, where we've
Yep.
got one or two staff and a handful of clients, and we do this one thing, and it's really cool. And then there are obviously exceptions and outliers to that. You look at Gold Coast Rec and Sport, which I know runs very similar to yourself, very similar to Johnny H, and they're enormous, and
Thank you.
an
Yes,
amazing,
yes, I'm as good as Rec and Sport. Thanks.
an amazing,
There way to go.
amazing track record. Well, it's I think that's the thing to consider, right? Is what defines amazing?
Yeah.
It's not for you or I to define, right? It's about the
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah, true.
Um, and critically, bigger in the disability sector isn't always better, right? Like I used to talk to parents around. We used to specialize. Johnny H specialized in clients with low to moderate intellectual disabilities. You talk about people that are socially awkward, but then we would end up with 60 awkward people at a Christmas event. So they can't be that awkward.
Yeah.
And then, right, so it's not actually about bigger necessarily being better. It's actually about I think people finding their people,
Yeah.
but some people just aren't going to want lots of people.
Yeah.
So that's where the small group thing comes off. And then there's other people that would actually just, I would much rather just have a support worker to go and do my stuff. I've got more psychosocial issues, and I need to step through that. So actually me having a one-on-one support worker with someone that I know really well that might, you know, have their own ABN and engage me through somewhere else, and it fits around their other life and all that sort of stuff. That again, that sort of proper microbrewery NDIS operator works perfectly. And ultimately, it's really around what people have got used to. The NDIS is newer on the Gold Coast than it is in those other areas of the country, and that's potentially a reason why um, the NDIS is, or the marketplace, if you will, is as constructed the way that it is on the Gold Coast. It's different because it's at a different lifespan of
Yeah. Okay.
um, operation. And I
So
think crystal ball time, I would suggest that there'd be some sort of a consolidation. I think that's going to come through over the next couple of years.
yeah. Okay. So let a few of the little guys decide to get bigger and expand, and
Yeah,
hopefully still leave some of that smaller thing for that niche for the
that's right.
need
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. So if you think about all the things that you need as a business in terms of your overheads, you talk about a venue, marketing, advertising, staffing, HR, payroll, finance, risk, insurance. Insurance wouldn't be 8 times as big because you're 8 times the size. So there's those economies of scale that you get from being that big, um, but not necessarily big. But you don't necessarily even need to lose focus. There's ways within a business of doing that as well. So yeah, I think you'll find that there'll be um, yeah, more people. Yeah, just a consolidation. If I'm honest, is probably the only way of putting it. Where there'll be an amalgamation, I would suggest, of some of the smaller providers, because there's benefit to, not only benefit to the providers, but benefit to the clients ultimately,
Yeah.
because they're going to get the same level of increased level of offering for the same uh, with the same relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's interesting that it's. I mean, I only know the Gold Coast. This is where I am. That's what I know. This is. I'd say I got into the industry accidentally, and it become that I'm using that word that you used before, calling. Like I didn't have a
Yeah,
choice.
yeah,
But I had to help, because if I didn't, and I got to learn a lot and realized I'm like, I love this. Like this
yeah,
is
yeah,
yeah, I get to see some really cool growths, my own included, which is really nice. So it's the more the clients grow, the more that I grow. That's I think the little guy thing is being that small guy. I'm hands on. I'm with them rather than
yeah.
behind an office over here with everybody else doing it. That would be where
It's
this.
about it's about relationships, right? As well. So, and there's the relationship that you've got with the clients, exactly like you said before. Families. I used to spend more time speaking to the families than I did the actual clients.
Yeah.
And then you've got the support coordinators. You throw those in the mix again. That talk about the reform navigators. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't. I think that will change the game, in my opinion, in terms of putting navigators in place instead of having the whole LAC support coordinator plan management model framework. I
So
think that
this
that
is
will work
this is something
a
I
lot
think you
better.
know a lot more than me on. So you know a bit more about what they are looking to do to change with the NDIS.
Uh,
Your face says,
I
maybe not."
yeah, I look, I used to get a lot of questions about it, right, from families and clients. So they wouldn't know where to turn. They would basically be suggested to contact us from either by a school or a teacher or a support coordinator or a friend. And we had clients that basically had pretty much nothing in their plans. We had other clients that had funding in their plans for like 3 years but had nowhere to use it because they didn't know how to use it. They had no idea what was going on. Got
Yeah,
the plan, how do I spend it? Like, they just because it's like it doesn't come with a manual, right? So um,
either the way, right?
that's yeah. I think that's where that navigator role will come through. So I took it upon myself because I needed to be forearmed to read through the initial. reform documents that are available. I think it was on the NDIA website. Um, it's been a while. I know that they've got other reforms that have come through that they're talking about. I know that they should be engaging in a consultative process, and there are certain departments that are and certain departments that aren't. And I suppose when I read through it, I was really looking at it through how is this going to impact our clients and our future clients, and what can they expect? Um, and yeah, of all the things that kind of jumped off the page for me, the navigator concept was probably the one that I was like, that makes the most sense of any of the reforms because you know, and I'm sure you're the same, Jace. You've spoken to people and you're like, they've got a plan. They have no idea who's out there, right? The if you go on Google and you Google disability support, there's like pages and pages and pages. Go back to the earlier point about how can you tell the difference between a good one and a bad one,
Yeah.
particularly when you look through the lens of a parent,
Yeah.
particularly when you look through the lens of a parent that sees the news about how many bad providers there are because there are people out there ripping the NDIS off. So your trust levels automatically in your boots.
Yeah.
Um, so you don't spend it, right? It just sits in the bank account waiting, and you just pray for a miracle that someone's going to be able to help you. Like, so, I need help. I've got a plan, but it's not fixing anything because I'm not engaging.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
there'd be, I'd be terrified to think how many people there are that are out there.
Yeah.
Terrified. And I'm pretty sure the NDIS won't do the exercise of working it out and picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, you've got a plan. Did you know that you can spend it? Here's how it works." Because the cost to the government would then be, you know,
Even more.
I can imagine it would go off the charts. But yeah, it's, you know, having that process where the LAC that sets the funding can also say, right, okay, you know, here are some providers in your area that I think might do the good. I know these guys do this. I noticed that you've got this in your NDIS plan. I suggest that you partner with these guys because they're really good at that. It's that local knowledge, that no local, that local base of um, experience, and then to be able to recognize what's on the invoices, right? Because I've got that line of sight over, you've got this in your plan, you've engaged with this provider, and this invoice doesn't align to those expectations. So you're burning through the plan too quick, or you've not got that line item, or, why are you using so much core funding and not capacity building funding? Are you actually doing the things that you need to be doing with that provider, or is there something else that you need to chop or change?
Yeah.
Think that's like a really holistic way forward. And I also think they're going to have their work cut out because that workload for those three jobs is going to be immense.
Yeah. Okay. It's going to go. Yeah. There's a lot to us knowing what kid. I work pretty directly with my clients, and the majority of them with their parents.
Yeah,
And I've had to learn. That's not a negative thing. It's a good thing that I've had to learn. I've had to learn the different, not all. I've had to learn a lot of the different things, or what feels like a lot of the different things that mums and dads had no idea about. That exists. I can get
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Geez, that would really help. Well, that would
yeah,
be great if I had known
yeah,
about it 2 years ago, but I'm glad I know about it now. Uh,
yeah,
things that like
yeah,
the SLES program. A couple of my clients are lucky that one of my clients got into it, and he's doing the
yeah,
SLES stuff actually with Johnny H. And I'm like, hey,
yeah,
so he's finishing school. Have you heard about this? And they're like, no. And now he's gone in and he's getting that, which is great because otherwise, I know he would just be at home playing computer games like
yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah,
So
and that's the key thing, right? Is particularly in that age bracket, is getting in early
yep,
because yeah, I mean, there are horror. I mean, I say horror stories, but the truth is that they're probably not the worst. But there's plenty of people that I've spoken to that have really struggled to engage post school. They've had, school's finished in September. They've not had a plan. They're like, oh, it's almost Christmas. Then it's January, and then you blink and it's April because that's what happens at the start of the year. They're still not doing anything. They've not done anything now for 8 months. The barrier to doing anything is so high
yep.
that it becomes, an absolute arm wrestle because I've already got the option and I've been doing nothing for so long. It's hard to then
Why
do
have it?
something different.
This is
Yeah.
what I do Monday. This is what I do Tuesday. This is what I do it. This is it now.
And then
You don't have to
and
change.
then conversely, yeah, almost again, almost on the opposite side of that, there's there are people that will do like, okay, we're not at school, we're going to do this on a Monday, this on a Tuesday, this on a Wednesday, this on a Thursday, this on a Friday, and it's like so packed and too diverse that I couldn't keep up with it myself. I'd need a nap by Wednesday afternoon. It's the I used to talk a lot. The phrase that paid, I suppose, for me was always around a soft landing. Create as soft a landing as you can post school. Um, don't make it so much about necessarily what you're doing. Make sure that there's a similarity in what you are doing. So there's a potentially Monday to Friday, right? Or you reduce it and you do Monday to Thursday, Tuesday to Friday. There's a block period of time during the week where there's a routine and you turn up at this time and you finish at that time and
Yeah.
you're engaged in something and you're with your peers so that there isn't that red flag that runs up around life so different, either you
Yeah.
know one way or the other, right? There's a level of continuity that goes on.
Yeah.
Life goes on because I've got an established time. I know what's going on. I can manage my time. I can manage my emotions around knowing where I'm going to be because I'm always in the same, in the same lane.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the hardest ones were the ones that kind of seem to deviate a lot from that plan, to be honest.
So they've gone from school, and instead of going along and going, okay, I'm replacing that with this, this, and this, and then
Yeah,
it's not the
yeah.
same, but it's here or here.
It was either all or nothing. They were the hardest for me to work with, if I'm honest, and try and settle the client again, client's perspective, right? Let's work with the family to make sure that the client's settled and they've got an established routine. The first thing that I always noticed was the emotional regulation, their ability to, manage their own emotions
Yep.
consistently. And often that wasn't necessarily displayed to us, that was displayed at home. So the phone calls were like after the day, how did they go? What was happening? Is there any feedback that you've got for us? And normally it'd be like, well, they haven't said anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's good. Here's what they did. Like you kind of get the opportunity to have that, but it's always hard. Something different every day was like, yeah, social butterflies versus, like we said, doing nothing on the Xbox and in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And then, mankind hasn't made a crowbar big enough to get someone that's, you know, or to, you paint the perfect picture, right? Someone that's got, yeah, ODD, social anxiety issues, ADHD, probably a level of ASD, and then you leave them in a bedroom for 8 months to fester on a PlayStation, and then try and get them to go and speak to people.
Yeah.
Never going to happen.
Yeah.
Never going to happen.
And then I painting that picture, I can imagine the potential of that compounding, and 10, 20 years later, who are they? How do they feel?
Yeah,
If they've been locked in a room for the majority of every day alone and nothing but that, that's a
yeah. It's
all time.
and it's interesting as I suppose you chunk up and get a bit deeper meaningful, right? It's interesting because it's a reflection of us as a society. Because 20 years ago it wouldn't have been an issue because there wouldn't have been the opportunity to play Xboxes in a bedroom. Now, it doesn't mean that opportunity would have been better or worse. It just would have been different. But they wouldn't have, as a society, we wouldn't have felt that they were necessarily trapped in a space that should be a safe space. It kind of probably isn't in truthfulness because it's not allowing any natural stretch or growth or any of the things that you consider to be essential as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a bit deep and meaningful for a Thursday night.
I've um, I've got a young fella that I look after on a Thursday, and we get into some quite deep and meaningful. So yeah,
Yeah.
Thursday's always a lot like that. Encountering problems with NDIS with planning and stuff like that. That's not something that's in your expertise, or is that not so much?
Well, like I said before, my thing is around it's everything that I guess very similar to yourself, Jace. I get asked phone calls, I get, phone calls with parents,
Yeah.
and they're like, I don't understand this. And I'm like, I'll do it. I'll work it out for you. I'll get back to you. Because the more that I know, the more I can help other people. So leave it with me. I'll ring you back, and I'd be on the phone to NDIS or support coordinators or someone being like, right, boy, listen, I kind of not, I need your help, or how does this work, or why is this like this, or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think that's again, I think that's what's interesting about the NDIS because no one,
No
even the
one
person that
person
wrote it,
knows it all.
no, no, none, and even the person that wrote it, right,
Yeah.
wouldn't know all of it. There's no definitive, and I think again, kind of the crux of the issue with the NDIS, no definitive font of truth, as I call it. Because you read my font of truth when I worked for Johnny H was the price guide. That was it. Because that within that, the intent or the spirit of the NDIS is in that. That's how I used to kind of portray it. And I was really fortunate. I had conversations with Chris Dremel, who's I think she's the director of workforce work training. So she looks after all the SLES training and the work, what do they call it, supported work and all that sort of stuff, right? So she's like quite high up in that sort of world. And I'd always say to her, right, what's the spirit behind this? Or I read this. What was what was the intent behind it? But yeah, yeah. I think the hard thing is as well, Jace, is the speed of reform. It's always changing, right?
Yeah.
Just as you get your head around it, they move it, they change it. The
Something
goalposts
else.
move.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like and I think another trigger for the retention issue that exists within the NDIC is just that level of reform. And the reform will also, mentioning those small people joining, it'll be one of the reasons that they go because they won't be able to keep up.
Yeah. Okay. I've come
It'll
out.
just be different.
Yeah. It's yeah, I'm scratching the surface of what I know. I'm like you were saying, I know what I need to know for my existing clients.
Yeah,
Hopefully a little bit more than that. I'd like to think a little bit more than that. Like at least when it comes to the NDIS about what I do and what I help, I know what I know. But yeah, learning all the NDIS, the pitfalls, the hurdles. I've called up NDIS and said, "Hey, can you give me a direct answer on this?" And I'm like, "Hang on, I don't feel right about that." And I put it in one of the groups,
yeah.
and I've got yelled at for it. It's like, "How could you think that?" And I'm like, "NDIS told me." They're like,
Mate,
"What's
so
wrong with you?" I'm like,
yeah,
"It's
it's
human, isn't it?"
ridiculous.
It's this guy's understanding of the rule is this, and
It's
he tells you that through a phone
well,
call.
yeah. So I remember I can't remember what I was doing, but I was in the UK and I think it was one of the early courses that I did in the sport and rec industry. And it was around the legal litigation stuff. It was just like, beware of the America syndrome, right? It was, back in the late 90s, litigation was becoming a pretty big thing in the UK.
Okay.
Um, and it was talking about the legal system and it was all of the acts basically don't have commas in them or grammar, which means that they're entirely open to interpretation. So actually, what gets enforced, and that's why I talk about the spirit and intent of things, because what gets
Yeah, okay.
enforced isn't the letter, because the letter doesn't mean anything, because it doesn't make sense, because it's got no commas or apostrophes, or grammatically doesn't make much sense. It's actually the spirit and the intent behind the documentation that makes that's the most important. And I look at the NDIS price guide, kind of that was always my um, yeah,
Okay.
font of truth.
So
Because
when you're reading that, okay, so this ISM loan code is for and their little blurb that they give about it. You're looking
yeah,
at why did they say that is what this is for,
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than
What does
what
that
the
mean?
words
What does
mean.
that mean for a client? Yeah, how would that correlate to a client's plan? So how would they know if they achieved that as a objective? So yeah, one of the things that we did at Johnny H was actually rename. We used to run a school leavers employment support program.
Yeah,
Feedback from the NDIS was that they were moving away from a school leavers employment supports program. Two key reasons. There are clients that at school that want to get part-time jobs that need support to get them.
yeah,
Second thing is that there are clients in their 20s, right, that weren't ready to get work when they left school, but they're ready now.
Yeah.
and they need an intensive, um, an intensive push on the back to kind of get to that point, right? So the NDIS recognised that there was talk of a name change, youth employment assistance, or something along those lines. So we moved away from calling it SLES to work readiness. And then when you read through actually the SLES funding, essentially that's what it's about. It doesn't actually read about school leavers. It's just called school leavers, but it reads about there being opportunities and pathways of support for employment. And it kind of talks through a very broad scope of
So
kind of how it
you could
works.
get a 29-year-old dude come in that he like definitely was not ready. The last 10 years he's been working on himself, and he's at that
Yeah,
point now. Look, I want to feel like I'm out in the community and I want to earn some wages of my own.
yeah. That's he at the moment he's not eligible, right? Because he's not a school leaver.
Yeah. And
And
work
the other
specifically what he needs.
yeah, yeah, and the other employment funding avenues don't address quite the same issue. So that was the talk behind the reform in that education space, but it seems to have been um, I'll not necessarily say smothered, but it seems to have been put on the back burner for the other reform, the key reform across the whole NDIS system, as opposed to it being just around that one funding line.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, there'll be some cool stuff coming though in that space, I'm sure, because there's lots of opportunities in that.
So with that, looking at some of the different changes that you're aware of that coming up, you're mentioning before things that you're seeing on the news and what have you. From your perspective, you think that there may be a bit more of a positive outlook, that it looks like the things coming, hopefully, looking like there might be some initiatives for improvement.
Yeah, I think some of it for sure. As I said before, the introduction of the navigators, I think in my mind is a big tick. All the clients that I've spoken to, it's a massive change. The reform around requiring providers to register again, I think let's put it this way, it's a good idea. The execution, the determinant as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is actually going to be in the detail.
Yeah,
Because if all you need to do to register is provide your insurance details, that doesn't actually really provide much credibility. But if they're actually going through your systems and your processes, and there's oversight of, say, your invoicing, so that they can check that there's credibility in that, then that makes a lot of sense. Right? So, it, but it's a bit like, it's when it gets to that level of administration as well. Again, then it's really hard to it's really hard. I would for the NDIS to justify, because the expectation is that, Jason, you're going to need to spend as much time preparing for an audit as a large, you know, three or
multinational,
four hundred, yeah, right, three or four hundred
multi-state.
staff,
Yeah,
yeah, not for profit, right? And you've not got the access to you've not got the opportunity to acquire any grant funding, because you're designated a for-profit business, whereas they're a not-for-profit, so they can do grant applications to help subsidise some of the costs of their overheads.
yeah,
So I don't necessarily know how they can roll it out effectively, but again, all of that points towards that thing that I was talking about around the market consolidating, in my opinion, because it will just some people will just be like, I just want to do support work. Like,
yeah.
that's what I want to do. I don't want to run a business. I just want to be. I love it. I love the
Just want to
relationship
help
that I've got with my.
people.
I love the relationship that I've got with my clients. I want to do all the good stuff. You know what? I don't want to do anything around marketing or networking. And you speak to people in the sector around that sort of thing as well, and you get a very clear, oh no, I'm not doing that, or I'm not good at that, or
Yeah.
I'll do this, not that. That's not cool. Um, Yeah, for most people, I always go back to bookkeeping, right? Because most people that I speak to are like service-based people. They're interacting and they're doing stuff. If you get them to try and sit down and pretend that they're an accountant for half an hour, they'll not.
Check out.
Yeah. They'll find every excuse to not reconcile their books. Like it's not it's not most people's idea of a good time. But that's why we have accountants, right? So you look at how things are going to change. I think there'll be, the approach that you're taking in terms of the breadth of knowledge base that you're trying to bring into your world. Um, I think is key. I think doing that sort of thing will create sustainability for yourself. It's just what that looks like for other people. But just doing what you do because it's what you've always done isn't going to work in the new world order with the reform that's coming through, the shifting client expectations, and the competitive pressures because it is a competitive industry. There are more people, as you say, more people popping up, means more offerings. Um, so it's becoming hard to compete, and you can't compete on price.
Yeah,
Price is set by the NDIS. It's about service delivery.
yeah. I definitely argue that you could compete on service, right? And that
Oh,
should be exactly what we're all competing on. We should be trying to
100%,
be as good as we can.
100%. Yeah, I think the hard thing with competing on service is um, everyone's got their favorite restaurant, right? And it's a bit like you go to your favorite restaurant, you know what you're going to get, you're going to pay for it. How many bad meals do you have at that restaurant before you decide that that's not your favorite restaurant anymore and you need to try somewhere else? It's the emotional attachment that we've got, but it's more than that even because it's families and clients. It's they're individuals and humans that are also generally, in my opinion, affected with a resistance to change. Right? No, we don't like change.
Yeah, I'll keep
So
dealing with this guy who's not quite perfect for me anymore, but I've been dealing with him for 10 years. He's the devil I know.
that's it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Again, I get it, and I think part of that is fueled by some of the stuff in the media as well, because there is that constant portrayal of people within the NDIS as being bad guys. You don't actually. When was the last time you turned the news on and you heard a hero story of the NDIS?
Yeah, I'm my bias is confirmed there. I don't watch the I don't watch the news. I don't like
But
I get to
I
see
mean, is
nice
a is
people
a
on
is a
Facebook.
really good example. So, a really good example is the Paralympics, right? So, the Australian swim team have just had their trials. There was I come from a swimming background, so if it's on, I'll watch it and I'll get quite immersed into it.
Yeah,
Um, the amazing records broken from both cohorts, the Paralympic swimmers and the Olympic swimmers,
yeah.
and there were a lot of obviously disability people within that, and there were a lot of TV interviews afterwards. And I can't actually say that I heard anyone talk about how they were really grateful that they got the support from the NDIS to be able to get the support that they needed to be able to get to hear or do that or didn't hear it.
And if that was something they were getting support from, they would be like, yeah,
Well, it's got a name. It's got a name now, right? It's not like block funding or government funding. I mean, it is. It's the NDIS, right? But it's kind of interesting. As an organisation, we wear the sticker. In theory, if you're registered, you put the sticker on I Heart NDIS. From a client's perspective, I've actually had the conversation with people. So Johnny H was really specific in our branding, and it always used to take me a couple of conversations generally to get through with people. But we wouldn't drive buses with disability on it or anything on it. In fact, they were just plain white buses with little stickers on it to identify that it was ours. We never used the word support, care, disability because our clients didn't want to associate as having a disability, needing support, or wanting care.
yeah, okay.
They just want to be accepted as a standard human being. So it was yeah, it's quite interesting. But you don't hear the good news stories. It's a political hot potato, which is sort of really unfortunate actually. And I would
Yeah.
um, love for the ministers or some, for people to just come out and actually talk about the good that it does. It's there's no perfect system. I come from the UK, right, with the NHS, which the sort of Medicare system's modelled off. And anyone that leaves the UK talks about how amazing the NHS is. But then when you're in the UK, all you do is complain about the NHS because the wait lists are too long and you've got this and I can't get that. And like it's kind of that's I mean I get the whinging pom thing, but um
I wasn't going to say anything.
but that's kind of it's also kind of true, but it's my thing is I'd love to see some good stuff over the or out from the NDIS. We when I was at Johnny H, we achieved some amazing things with clients, had some amazing outcomes. Within 6 months, we had clients that were barely recognizable from a behavioral standpoint from their parents. The parents didn't recognize them. And
Yeah.
I think that's just the best thing because the client clearly wasn't being themselves when they were at school, mainstream school.
Yeah.
They left school, they had that soft landing, they met their friends, they found some friends on their own that are like them, and then they grew and they
Yeah.
became themselves. And they went from being the quietest person in the room to the noisiest, and they were loved because of it. And I just think that's so cool, so cool.
Yeah. That's the thing. Those are the stories that when you were saying that before, and I'm like, you were like, no one gets to hear these stories, and I'm like, I hear these stories every day, the positive ones. I'm
Yeah,
hearing them going, oh my God, this is great, because I'm hearing them go, hey, yesterday I hung out with my friend, because I'm hearing all of these great, but yeah, I don't think about the other people, and all they hear is NDIS scammers, NDIS fraud, NDIS
yeah.
scary number. Yeah,
If you're in the sector, you hear it and you can kind of temper that balance. But
yeah,
on the whole, it's typically, and also I sort of I joke about it quite generally, to be honest. But there's also the Tracy Grimshaw effect, right? Long live Tracy Grimshaw. In terms of current effect, right?
yeah,
Like, no one lives in the excitement of Tracy Grimshaw. It's all fear. So the NDIS would never have been on there because the amazing stuff that it's done. It would only ever have been on there because people defrauding it.
yeah. Okay.
What about the clients that have achieved these amazing things? And they have current affair. Tracy Grimshaw, God love her, has amazing positive news stories, right? And they're on there, like kids that can do stuff, kids that couldn't do stuff, and if they can't, and then they can, it's because the community's rallied around them. But at some point in time, someone has to go. Surely, someone has to go. Oh, geez, NDIS did a real good job of that one. They actually gave the funding where it was needed. Over
Yeah,
the course of 3 years, they removed, right? Haven't heard about the success stories of disability clients not being housed in aged care provisions.
yeah,
That was a big thing in the news. I remember it being in the news all the time. Um, and the penny hadn't dropped for me at the time, but I mean, it was a big thing, and I can't confirm nor deny that it's occurring at the moment, but I'm going to assume that it isn't because I don't hear it on the news. So
okay,
yeah, but you don't hear that, right?
yeah, yeah. It's hard to. Yeah, what sells newspapers?
Well, yeah, again, yeah, go back to the earlier statement about kids in bedrooms, right? What sells newspapers? It's not good news.
Yeah,
So yeah, I get it. We've become almost like pre-programmed to clickbait. So we see those headlines and we click, and every click means money, and we don't click the good ones, we click the bad ones. And I've saw
yeah.
a study that was around that. The negative news articles get 20 times as many clicks or something as a good news story. So yeah, bad
Back,
news travels faster than good news.
so back to your study. So, what strategies did you find, or do you believe would be effective in improving staff engagement and retention in the disability sector?
So there were a couple of factors that were through it, and I guess looking at it from a leadership perspective, that's where I think the industry can do some work. So it was recognised, things like career development opportunities. It's not an industry that you work in that you feel like you're going to get career advancement. So having the time invested in you, if that's something you want to step up to. So the recommendations of the report essentially were around connecting with the employees more. So given that you've got a big organisation, you've got loads of individual support workers out in the world doing their thing. How often are they getting touch base with? How do they get touch base? How do you know what the sentiment of the workers is across the top? So things like staff engagement surveys, they've always been critical for me, but it was actually something that would address a lot of issues within the reported data in terms of that engagement, because essentially, if you don't measure it, you can't find out about it. And it would be different across all organizations as well. It kind of potentially seems a bit like common sense, but it's actually really important when you have those as well, is then making sure that from an individual perspective, you have those conversations around career journey, right? We want to know that we're on a path ourselves. Our job's to develop the clients. The leader's job within the disability organisations is to develop the staff and the workforce that they've got that are working for them, not only because that improves the standard of care they're delivering to clients, but it makes them feel that they're part of something as it grows, right? That they've
Yeah.
got opportunities to aspire to, uh,
Rather
and
than
it's not enough.
rather than
Yeah,
I've been with this company since it started and it's grown. I've stayed the same. This company's
correct.
grown. We're looking after way more people, and these guys have actually helped me out. I now know this, this, and this. I can help these guys as well. I understand a bit more. Some of it
Yeah,
flows to my personal life. I've improved
yeah.
while I'm here.
There's there's definitely a need, and you sort of mentioned it earlier, right, around learned experience within the sector. So there's definitely need for learned experience, but it's the expectations of the workforce has changed from what it was 5, 10 years ago. The expectation now of leaders is that there's a much higher level of empathy. There's a level of understanding that goes on in terms of the almost like the global workplace. You think about it, it was back in the, well, whenever you consider it, right, 50s or 60s, like, it was all around stamping time cards, and you were a manager. You managed people. Go here, do this repetitive task. Whereas these days, the workplace is just so much more dynamic. There's technological factors. The role of the manager, right, has become much more of a leader. There's management components within it, but it's the job to basically create the environment more so for the
Yeah,
staff to do the things that they're inspired to do. So there's been that shift. And that's not necessarily a skill that you get by doing the job. So, an example, just because I'm a great support worker doesn't mean that I'll be a great support worker leader or a team leader.
yeah,
And then just because I'm a good team leader doesn't mean I'll be a great state manager. And because I'm a great state manager doesn't mean that there's different skill sets for each of those step points
yeah,
um, that you need to acquire along the way, and have that lived experience in that space to kind of then bring it to life.
yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, so looking at the improving staff engagement and the retention and that, is that something that should be coming directly from the company that they're in, or is that something that should be coming from the government, like thinking like the government incentives, like how they've got free TAFE
Well,
and things like that,
yeah, that's
upskill?
actually really good. That's a good point. So in the DSS, Department of Social Services, in their NDIS workforce plan, they're not necessarily allocating funding towards things, but they're recognizing that they need to develop. They still talk about managerial because I guess because it's government, not necessarily so much leadership, but recognizing that they need to develop those essentially training systems and pathways in order to provide those opportunities for people within. Um, my personal take on that though is that essentially charity starts at home. So it's the job of every organization to breed effective leaders, because effective leadership breeds effective employees, which breeds in the service industry engaged and rewarded clients. And it really is a trickle down, but actually more so, I think the real win in a scenario like that is that actually you also get up. So the clients actually also get impact on the staff, who get impact on let's say the team leaders, and it flows up as well as flowing down. So I think that the leadership competencies within the disability sector is probably one of the key, again, in the sector, key focus area.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
definitely, definitely some work to do.
definitely some work to do. Would you So, if you were talking to someone that was a small business owner, which you do at the time, so
Yeah.
you're talking to someone who is a small business owner, What would you say would be the best way to apply or to begin applying something like that to get that step up for
I
your?
guess I guess the key thing is it's that works when you've got other people in and around you, right? Understand in most people's situations, small business owner operator, you are the accountant, leader, business owner, marketing expert, service provider, cleaner, all of the above.
Yeah,
I think the critical thing in that comes back to the piece that we spoke about earlier. Surround yourself with people that you know can provide you the support that you need. Um, the key thing is working out that support you need, and there's plenty of support out there. So one of the things that I do as a hobby, straight in inverted commas, hobby. One of the things that I do as a hobby is work with the Queensland government on their mentoring program. So the Queensland government have a free business mentoring program that anyone can sign up for. And when you sign up with them, you basically get assigned, I think you get two, maybe three hour-long video calls with people that have, like myself, that have that volunteer their time with um, different expertises that you basically get partnered with based off the information that you request from the government. So
really.
yeah, seriously, it's an amazing program. So you lodge an application to go on as a mentee, as a I suppose as an applicant, and then you get given. They give you a basic business business case form, so you can go on there, and the more information that you put on, they essentially then, based off of what you put, as in, what do you want to do, where do you need some help, where are you at, what's the life cycle of your business. They then partner you up with mentors specific to what you're looking to get out of that conversation.
Yeah,
And then
wow.
you go back in 6 months' time and you go, right, after my last one, I did this. Now I need some help doing this and this. And you get different mentors that come in and go, right, I had one today. I read their notes. It was a capacity NDIS provider and OT provider for medical products. So he had his first session. He put all this stuff into place and then comes back to the table and goes, right, okay, any new ideas? Because I've done this, and I'm at this point here, and here's what I'm thinking and finding, and what do you guys think? And there's support out there, and it's not all necessarily um, you know financial or paid for, but the networking events, even Jason, that you organise, right? Like the opportunity within those to kind of go and build those connections and get that peer support.
Yeah,
And I suppose the thing is, Jace, every time that you find yourself coming across someone, can you go, oh, I kind of wish I'd known that? Is then working out a way, not necessarily of you sharing that knowledge, but create that as a trigger for yourself. Because if you've got a question in your head, everyone else has probably got a question in theirs.
yeah,
So um, even at one of your networking meetings, right, you might have like a shoebox with a slit in it and some forms, and it's like if what's one thing that you'd wish you'd known, or what's one thing that you wish you could eliminate from your business, or what's one thing that what's one person that you wish you could speak to get some business advice on why? Because in the process of doing
that's
that,
really cool. Yeah,
because in the process of you doing that, you'll find that you'll probably learn those answers as well, right?
yeah, yeah,
If nothing else, it gives you some awesome topics for your podcast.
yeah, yeah. Win, win, win. That's it. It's
Yeah,
if someone else wins because I'm winning at something, then somebody else wins because they're winning at that. It's all
yeah,
ups and
yeah.
pluses.
There'd,
Yes.
be- there'd be some really cool, like it's those things. What do even what do you do as a business owner when you don't know what to do and get everyone else's opinion? And you'd probably find that there'd be like three common themes within that even.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I can even put that stuff in the Facebook group.
Yeah, yeah. The
That's
trick is we're all thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So the Dunning-Kruger effect essentially is the reason, and it starts off a bit negative, but I don't mean it to be that way. Um, but it's the reason that, you meet some people and you're like, you don't know anything, but you come across like you think you know all of it. That's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So typified by the fact that the more you become an expert, the more you realize that you don't know.
Okay. I must be an expert then. I
Yeah.
need, I
It's
need to
kind
be
of
sure.
it's kind of interesting because you get into it and you think you've got your head wrapped around everything and you kind of get some confidence and then you start to lose it all because you realize that actually there's so much more that you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
That's
no, there's yeah, no, yeah. But much like the NDIS document, right? It's almost impossible to know everything about everything.
yeah,
Surround yourself with people that you believe you can get the answers from. And if you don't, hunt them out.
yeah. Yeah, cool. And sorry, what was the name of that again? So the free business mentoring. So for anyone that's going to Google it, I'll
Um,
put a link. A link will be on the website.
it's definitely worth looking into, to be honest, for anyone that's running a small business that's that's not even struggling, to be honest, because half the time knowing that you're on the right track's a bonus, right? Because you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Just those little things
uh,
that somebody else that knows more or has done it
yeah.
already.
I've had great conversations with people through that program, from all different businesses and all different sectors, and that's why I kind of inverted commas call it my hobby, because I get to um, speak to people about the things that they're really passionate about, and then actually try and apply some diversity of thought to their mindset. Their industry does things a certain way, and they're like, "Oh, I don't have to do that." And I'm like, "Oh, well, the country's largest gymnastics club. I was the GM of that for just shy of 2 years. We used to do this as an enrollment program, and that worked really well. Oh, yeah, like you just kind of get those ideas. So
Yeah,
yeah,
learning,
it's good.
learning, learning. Um, okay, so as we'll be wrapping that up then. So leaving any of our viewers, is there anything that you would like to impart or share that I've
Oh,
missed?
I don't think so. No, I think I've enjoyed it. Jace, thanks for having me on. I suppose if there is, I'm always up. If there's anyone that's got any questions about anything, I'll give you you've got my contact details. Pop them around on the thing. I'm always happy to um, take on. And if there's any questions of anything that comes up, or there's any major themes of anything, Jason, I'll come back for a addendum part two type
Yeah.
scenario. So
Yes, I've learnt from my previous one that part twos are going to be quite likely to happen for this because there's so much information and
yeah, yeah,
there's it's definitely a thing. So I will leave some links to fresh perspectives, some so you can find some information and contact James, and a little bit more information there for anyone that needs ways to contact him or questions to ask. Um, all right. Well, thank you very much, for everybody that's listening. Stay motivated, stay happy, and I look forward to seeing you next time.